Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this evening's presentation. First of all, I'd like to invite Councillor Akubachi, to come up and just tell us how things are going to work out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Very warm welcome. We do deserve some warm weather that we are getting in. So I think it's, I can only say that Paul Comet must have got it all the way from America for us. So we do appreciate that. This evening, I think we've got quite an important subject we want to discuss. And it's a great privilege for me to be able to introduce you to four speakers. They are very distinguished speakers, and they are extremely knowledgeable and expert in their own field. So it will be fitting that we should be discussing here in Bedford. I can only say that from the Council's point of view, we, about nearly 2 years ago, we did pass a resolution asking the Water Authority as well as Public Health Authority not to fluoridate the water in this part of England. I understand that they haven't done it for the last 3 years, but there is no particular sort of feelings at the moment with the anti-water authority or the health service, for that matter, public health authorities, that they are not going to introduce the fluoride again in the water. But we have to go on campaigning, and this is why it's extremely important that we discuss openly as widely as possible. So we've got these speakers, they're going to put forward their ideas and views, and afterwards, you, lovely people here, you will have the opportunity of asking questions or putting forward your idea. So that's the whole object of the exercise. And this evening, we hope it will be possible to have a real exchange of ideas and views. So first of all, I want to introduce you. It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Stephen Peckham. Professor Peckham is a Professor of Health Policy and has a joint appointment as Director of the Centre for Health Services at the University of Kent, and as Professor of Health Policy in the Department of Health Services. He is also Director of the Department of Health Policy Research Unit in Commissioning and the Healthcare System, and Joint Research Unit based at the University of Manchester and CHSS. Stephen has over 20 years of academic research experience and previously worked in local government and the voluntary sectors. So he knows all about the local government, the trials and tribulations which we go through. His main research interests are in health policy analysis, organizational and service delivery, primary care and public health. He has published widely on health and social policy issues and research on the book, on a number of research books that have been published on primary care, health and social policy, and public health ethics. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Professor Peckham.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and just to echo that this is an important topic. The one bit which I think is also very important, as you'll see from the bottom of this slide, is that I am a member of Hampshire Against Fluoridation and have been for the last 5 years involved in our campaign in Southern Hampshire to stop fluoridation being imposed upon the city of Southampton and some of the surrounding areas. I've been asked this evening just to talk briefly a little bit about the changes that have happened to the health service and how that relates to water fluoridation, and particularly what will happen here in Bedford. You will all remember that the new government came in, there was a lot of controversy about the changes to the health service. But one of the key changes which actually didn't get much discussion was the fact that all of the public health services that were previously delivered through the National Health Service have been shifted. And the Health and Social Care Act has provided a new structure for public health within the UK. And the first of these is that councils like Bedford Borough Council or Central Bedfordshire, so county or unitary authorities, are now responsible for public health, and particularly for dental public health, which is where water fluoridation sits. They make decisions about water fluoridation schemes. That's whether they start, whether they change, or whether they end. And I think let's come back to this point in a minute. Most importantly, these councils have set up something called health and wellbeing boards. I'll say a little bit more about those in a minute. But actually that's where councillors and public health professionals and health professionals come together to decide whether there should be water fluoridation schemes or not. But the important point to remember that it is the council that makes the decision. So here we're talking about Bedford Borough Council. There is one new organisation, and that's called Public Health England, and that covers the whole of England. And they will manage existing schemes of water fluoridation. Now, that actually includes the scheme here, whether it's here or not. So that's the kind of lay of the land. The Act itself, I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail, but there's 3 sections of the Health and Social Care Act. One bit is really about what the Secretary of State can do, and what the Secretary of State can do is respond to requests by local authorities that have the power to make decisions. Then there's a whole section which talks about how you get involved in terms of commencing or varying or terminating ending schemes, about who makes those decisions and how those decisions are made. And then there's another bit of the Act which covers the schemes that are already existing. So, for example, Bedford, or as Joy was saying, in the West Midlands as well. So, who actually does what in the new scheme? Well, let's start with the Secretary of State for Health. So this is Jeremy Hunt at the moment. And basically, if he's requested by a local authority or a group of local authorities to start a fluoridation scheme or to change a fluoridation scheme, the Secretary of State's responsibility is to make the contract with the water company. That's what his responsibility. He has one more, which is if there are so obvious catastrophic bad effects from water fluoridation, he can also terminate schemes without even talking to local authorities. But given the way the Department of Health works, that actually at the moment is probably unlikely anyway. He also makes the decisions about how much money is paid by any local authority. So the money to run a water fluoridation scheme will come from local authority budgets. They've been given a new public health budget. The money for the fluoridation scheme will come from that budget, i.e. it will be paid for by the council. And they won't then be able to use that money on other public health or dental public health schemes. So Public Health England's responsibility is really to do what the Secretary of State asks them. So if the Secretary of State says this group wants to terminate a water fluoridation scheme, then they have to implement that. Or they manage existing schemes. So they are in fact now responsible for running the schemes that still exist in Bedfordshire. They're also responsible for the West Midlands scheme as well. But they only manage it. They have no decision-making powers over the area that's covered, or whether they should start new schemes, or whether they should terminate existing schemes. So they're really acting just as an agent. The really important people is like the organisations that Councillor Latchley sits on. So these are the organisations that make decisions about new schemes or varying existing schemes. Often schemes cover local authority boundaries or council boundaries, and the council has to make the arrangements for deciding how they work with other councils. If it comes into a big fight and nobody can make their minds up, then it's likely the Secretary of State may step in. But it is really about how local authorities work together. And as I said, they pay for the schemes if they're being implemented. So if they're being terminated, they take the savings from any scheme that's currently operating. So, what does this mean for Bedford, having laid out the kind of basic structure? Well, this is a map, first of all, of the areas in Bedford which have water fluoridation. So where the yellow blobs are, right in the centre of the map there is Bedford. Now, only some areas of the county are fluoridated, and fluoridation, actually Bedford for technical reasons, has been stopped for, well, 2 years, but certainly I thought nearly 3 years, as a technical. I mean, in that sense, it would be classed as an existing scheme, because it hasn't been formally terminated. Now, here's an interesting graph. Now, the actual bit we're interested in is the thicker line in the centre. That's Bedford's dental health carers line for children 5 years old. And all the time, you'll see from 93 through to 2007, which is the date we have for the last set of statistics, the rate of dental decay has been climbing. Well, you know, if it was fluoridated up until that point, you wouldn't expect the rate to be climbing. You would expect it to at least stay flat or even reducing if what everybody says about water fluoridation is true. And I'm sure Paul will be telling us the real truth. So who's responsible for what in Bedford? I want to just unpick now down through the council. So any schemes in Bedfordshire will be classed as existing schemes. So even though you're not getting fluoridated water at the moment, it will be classed as an existing scheme. The important point there is that if Public Health England wants to start redoing all the technical stuff to put fluoride back in, it can. And I think that's an important point to take account of. Bedford Borough Council, though, can actually terminate the scheme formally now. So you may have made a request 3 years ago for other people to stop it. You are now in a position, with the council being able to put up a motion, work with the other council within the county to terminate the scheme. So who are the key decision makers in that? Well, I think there's two groups. The first is the Director of Public Health and the Dental Public Health Consultant. I presume are they here tonight? No? Well, anyway, unlikely. They're likely to be promoters of the scheme, and I think we need to be very clear about that. The other group is the Health and Wellbeing Board. So the ones in red become the really important people to think about as the officers in this county or in the town here who you should be thinking about. So there's the Director of Public Health, there's a Dental Health Public Consultant, and then there's a Dental Advisor. So they are key people. They are key people in the decision-making process. The other group of very key people is the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is chaired by the current Mayor of Bedford. There are some other councillors who are also on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and then there are representatives then from Public Health, but also from what is now the Clinical Commissioning Group, which is the organisation that pays and runs a lot of the primary community and health services within Bedfordshire. So these are key people that you really need to be aware of, and particularly the councillors, the key councillors that you might want to start to work with and start to inform them about the issues relating to water fluoridation. So how does it work? A little bit more detail. So what we've got at the moment is probably schemes that span 2 councils. So you're going to have to work with the other councils. So building bridges, not just with Bedford Borough Council, but also Central Bedfordshire Council. Not so much Luton, because Luton's never had water fluoridation in the county. Any council in that area can start the moves towards terminating the scheme. So either of the 2 councils could be involved in doing this. And then you have to work between the 2 councils to work out the arrangements to do that. And it's the Health and Wellbeing Board, so those people that I've just shown up on the screen, who will be very important in terms of that process. But the key thing here is to make sure that as any approach to terminating the scheme has got support within the council, that the councillors do support it. Because unfortunately, when the Department of Health, who are signed up to water fluoridation, kind of lock, stock and barrel, passed the new regulations on the processes, what they've actually put in is a clause in that guideline regulation that if a bid for termination fails, so i.e. it goes to the voting council and the council say, no, we want to continue this, you can't actually bring another vote for termination for 20 years. Now, that is really important. So you've got to work at the support. I mean, it's really critical about how we go about this. And we're in a different situation in Southampton, but working with people is really, really important. Persuading and trying to work with people. There's quite a lot of process, and you don't need to get too interested in this process, but the main points here are that there is a set procedure that councils have to follow. They have to have regard for different things that are laid upon them as duties, both within health services, but also as community organisations and the well-being of their populations. And they've got to take into account issues like costs, and most importantly, they've also got to take into consideration all kinds of factors, including costs. This is slightly better than it used to be under the regulations, because there was a funny clause which we fell foul of in Southampton, which said that the decision-making body, which had then was the Strategic Health Authority, basically could ignore all arguments if they thought it would improve people's health. Well, that catch-all phrase is gone in the new regulations, thank goodness. But the important thing is that the councils must show that they've considered all of these kinds of issues. There is a consultation process associated with this, both in terms of kind of widely advertising the proposals, but also running some kind of process for 3 months where people can make representations to the councils before they come to a final decision. How they go about that is actually being left up to the individual councils. Again, the Department of Health has decided that local authorities are probably grown up enough to work out how to consult their local public. Whereas before, there were very, very strict guidelines because essentially the health service was always frightened of things like consultation in case they got the wrong answer. So what can you do? And that's the really important part. Given that kind of framework about things, what can you do? Well, the first point is that public opinion counts, even more so now than it ever did before. More so because councils are in charge, but more so because there isn't a line in the legislation that says that you can be ignored. And so I think that's a very important point to bear in mind. So how do we go about this? Well, in Southampton, to get the City Council to change the law, we use powers under the Community Act, which was passed in 2010, to force the council to debate a motion in full council. Now in Southampton we had to collect 1% of the population, which was 2,000. We collected 6,500 votes, so it's not that difficult. In Bedford, I looked on the website, we've got to collect 30 votes to force a debate in council, 30 signatures. So kind of think about this as a way of opening up a discussion around water fluoridation in the council. But you need to do other kinds of things as well. I think it's really important that you need to contact your MP and tell them that, Public Health England will be wasting public money if they try to instill water fluoridation again, because it doesn't work, and it's not actually improving dental health. There are better ways to do it. Contact your councillor and actually find out what they think about water fluoridation. Are they for it? Are they against it? And collect them. Collect those responses. Make them public. Get them aware of other ways of dealing with dental health problems. So what you need to do is to put that pressure on. Write to your local MEP as well, because there's a current petition going through the European Union. Your MEP can actually put some pressure into that, and if you need information, we can let Cynthia actually have that information as well. And write to a local newspaper. This is an issue that must be kept in the political and the public forum, because if it is, then you're halfway to winning over, because once people start reading about it, on the whole, they will be against water fluoridation. So it's very important that you keep this in the public domain and keep it in the political domain. So the strategy is to get it on the local political agenda. Really important. If the council's in charge, it must be on that local council agenda. But don't attack your councillors. Don't tell them they're stupid because they think fluoridation works. If they do, work with them. Put your arguments across and keep those arguments simple and short, because nobody's going to listen to reams and reams and reams of information. Keep it well informed and evidence-based, and stick to the facts. So, I think in Southampton, we are winning because we keep to those very, very simple rules. So we keep out of conspiracy theories, we keep out all that. What we do is present the evidence in a very, very simple and clear way, and as short and quick and simple as possible. And one of the things that you might want to think about doing is doing something which we did in Hampshire when the Strategic Health Authority agreed, and it's something that West Midlands have also been doing, is using postcards which basically say, I do not consent to having my water fluoridated, particularly with hexafluorosilicic acid in the water. And the right person probably to send it to here is the mayor. I mean, the key decision maker. So, actually having a postcard campaign locally, which you can all send to the mayor, so that the mayor is very clear that there are, the local population does not consent to being medicated, would be a really, really important and useful way of pushing this onto the agenda. But the warning is, lay your ground carefully, because unlike in Southampton, where we are fighting to stop water fluoridation being imposed on us, you will be considered as having an existing scheme. And therefore, it's really important to get your campaign right and well supported, so that you know the decision is going to go the right way, i.e. to terminate, rather than the wrong way, and you'll be stuck for 20 years. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope it is working. Is it working? Thank you very much indeed, Stephen, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Graham Munro Hall. For over 35 years experience as a dentist in Britain and continental Europe. In 1992, he was awarded a fellowship of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology for his work on dental toxicology. He and his wife, Lillian, who is here this evening, also a dentist, have a mercury-free and metal-free practice and developed the whole detox therapy for safe dental treatment. In 1999, they started the first orthomolecular dental clinic in the UK, offering the safest dental treatment possible. They published their book, In Toxic Dentistry Exposed, and exposed in detail the link between dentistry and chronic diseases. Dr. Munro Hall has been an advisor to the German government and was instrumental in changing prevailing opinion about the safety of mercury amalgam fillings, and he goes around throughout the world giving lectures on this particular subject. He also is a Bedfordian. He lives in Bedford, so we call it somebody who is in this particular part of this world. Graham Munro Hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. One slight correction, I haven't been a dentist for 25 years, I've been a dentist for 43 years. And during this time, I first came into this whole fluoride issue via the mercury and amalgam issue, in that a whole series of events and circumstances led me to realise that what I've been practising for a number of years, i.e. using mercury and amalgam fillings, was in fact not only detrimental to the patient's health, but also detrimental to mine and my staff's health. And the more I looked into this and actually observed the science, I realised that my teachers in dental school had in fact lied to me. Or to put it as Professor Dimmy says, if anyone tells you that mercury amalgam is safe, they're either liars or incompetent, and you have to ask, which one are they? And the same holds true of fluoride. Whoever says fluoride is safe and effective is either lying to you or incompetent because they haven't taken any time to learn the scientific truth. These are the only two positions that they can take. When you point this out to them, they sometimes get quite heated. Being 43 years in practice and having my dental professors over the years talk to me like this, the one comforting thought is that all these professors are now dead. So I take great comfort from that. During my mercury fight over the years, which has gone on and is actually now drawing to a successful conclusion, I came across David Kennedy, another familiar name in the fluoride world. And David helped me with our amalgam issue, and it also came onto the fluoride issue, and through him I met the four giants in the fluoride world. These were John Yamianis, Phyllis Mullinix, Roger Masters, and Professor Conant here. Now, all these four people have one vital thing in common. None of them are dentists, none of them are medical doctors, they're all scientists at the top of their profession. And they came into this fight as scientists because they believed in the absolute scientific truth. It was a principle through which they led their lives by. And when they were exposed to the fraudulent research and all the other shenanigans that's gone on, both in the mercury field and more especially in the fluoride field, it is really upsetting to them and to their moral sense. So to these four giants of the fluoride world, we owe an enormous debt of thanks. John Yamianis I met in 1994. He wrote the book Fluoride, the Aging Factor. And he said to me, if you think mercury is bad boy, you know nothing about fluoride. And I thought, yeah. What do you know? I had children at the time. I had swallowed all the research that the false research the dental schools had given me. Even my own children, I added fluoride, God forbid. And he said, the facts are, fluoride is both dangerous, unproven, and it's based on fraudulent research. And when I looked into it, he was totally correct. It's unproven, it's dangerous, and the research behind it is fraudulent. There's enough fluoride in a tube of toothpaste to kill a small child. And you may say, well, that's a fact, you see it on the child is not supposed to swallow it. But there have in fact been recorded cases of death through children swallowing fluoridated toothpaste. It makes as much sense to put fluoride in the water as to swallow sun cream and go out in the sun. If fluoride has any effect whatsoever, it's a topical effect, it's not a systemic effect. If you swallow it, it will have a great deal of effect, but one of the effects it won't have is protecting you from dental decay. Even the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control in Atlanta, now admit that swallowing fluoride is ineffective because its effect is only locally. And they themselves say it's dangerous in the water for the elderly, those with kidney conditions, and, though it's not well publicised, babies on infant formula. Even the British Dental Association, along with the American Dental Association, now recommend that you do not make up formula with water that is fluoridated because the child will receive a toxic dose of fluoride. So, the other thing they never told us at dental school was what exactly fluoride was. They used to say, oh, it's sodium fluoride, and refer to experiments in the history of the 1930s, where sodium fluoride was indeed used, because sodium fluoride was a waste product of the aluminium industry, and the aluminium industry had been fined huge amounts of money for dumping fluoride in the water and being fined. So in order to get over this, they sponsored research, and the research happened to show, strangely enough, that fluoride in the water was wonderful to everybody, therefore everyone's a winner. And not only do they not have to pay for their stuff to be dumped, but they get paid for it to be dumped. But they changed all that. They no longer use sodium fluoride, they use hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is even more dangerous than it sounds. This is not a product of the aluminium industry, this is a waste product of the fertilizer industry. It's so corrosive, it rots glass. You cannot store this stuff in glass cylinders because it rots glass. And when they're dumping this stuff, they have to have specially lined pits to make sure it doesn't leak into the environment. It's never been tested for safety. It's never been tested for effectiveness. It's an enzyme disruptor. The two things it really does for enzyme disruptions are it brings an early onset of puberty for females. In fluoridated areas, this can start administration as early as 9 years of age. As an enzyme disruptor, it delays the eruption of teeth. Now, the pro-fluoridation people have used this fact because they say, if we examine a 12-year-old group there in a fluoridated area to a 12-year-old group there, the 12-year-old group in a fluoridated area has less decayed, missing or filled teeth than those living in a non-fluoridated area, which, when you first look at the statistic, is exactly true. But what they don't tell you is because of the enzyme disruption, the bone hasn't developed properly in the fluoridated group, and the teeth haven't come through yet. So they have no teeth to look at, therefore those who have developed normally might have decay. It does connective tissue damages, hence the aging factor of John Younghouse' book. It's a thyroid depressant. If you have a hyperactive thyroid, the traditional treatment against a hyperactive thyroid is fluoride. So no wonder we're seeing an epidemic, especially around here, of thyroid abnormalities. The other thing, of course, is arthritis, especially with hexafluorosilicic acid. The fluoride actually drops into the stomach, because when that hits the stomach, it's actually broken into a very, very potent acid, and that acid hits the connective tissue, and hence the arthritis events. But all this pales into insignificance when you go back a few years, and you go to what Dean Byrd, who was head of the National Cancer Research in America, stated in Congress. He said that fluoridation in water causes an increase in cancer rates overall of, he thought, between 10 and 13.5%. As you imagine, this, in the late 1970s, caused a bit of a furor. It actually even went to court, where even his opponents admitted that his figures were correct. And the way science works is, if someone does an experiment or a hypothesis and you disagree with it, you repeat what he has done to show where he has gone wrong. And they can't do it with his figures. So if you have a sort of 13% increase, undisputed, in cancer across the board, and that is worth delaying or reducing the decay rate, I, for one, want to know who makes decisions like this. The other thing, of course, is fluoride is indicted for one very specific cancer in young males, sarcomas. We've had a few in this area, young males of 19 to 21, who have died of this. There was some recent research, was in fact covered up. One of the professors, whose name I can't mention, but I think he's called Chester Bowles, actually sat on the research with his PhD student and refused to publish it. She got round that, got it published, and actually put a complaint against him, which caused a huge fuss, which is still ongoing all the time. So what I'm saying, even though the fraudulent research and the sitting on it has gone on from 60 years ago, it's still going on now. We met Phyllis Mullignix, a PhD scientist, who lost her research job because she told the truth about fluoride. She was doing a research project on it, she was told not to publish it or lose her job, she published it and lost her job. One of the things she was looking at was probably why fluoride first came into this is that the atomic industry produces as a byproduct vast amounts of fluoride. It leads it to the production of atomic weapons. And in the Manhattan Project, they were releasing fluoride as a gas into the atmosphere. And the school downwind from the research establishment, because this fluoride is so corrosive, the windows were etched milky. So the headmaster thought, this can't be too healthy for the children. So he went and asked the research scientist, what are you releasing that causes the windows to etch? So they have, and Phyllis got the actual memo, said, we must find a positive reason for releasing fluoride, because to make the atomic bomb is more important than the health and welfare of children in the school just downwind from the manufacturing plant. So what they came up with, they said, well, fluoride, we know, is good for teeth. And if we look at people who work making the atomic bombs with the fluoride, their decay rate is far, far lower than average out there, proving that fluoride is okay. Research which is still spewed at me today by pro-fluoride groups. But if you actually look into it, again, it's true, they had less decay. Because the fluoride had rotted their teeth, and most of them had no teeth at all. Phyllis also pointed in the direction of 4 large, long-term, peer-reviewed research groups to show that fluoride would actually increase decay rate by between 10 and 21%. Roger Masters, the other one, he did a huge study showing that hydrofluorosuccinic acid actually increases the lead absorption of children. So if you live in a fluoridated area, your children will preferentially absorb lead into their brains. This, of course, leads to reduced intelligence, and it's also, in fact, quite racist, because it affects, and he did his research, blacks, Hispanics, and those from the Indian subcontinent, because most of them have a lactose intolerance and cannot have the protective factors against fluoride that the white population have. Therefore, they, as a subset group, are far more prone to injury through fluoride in the water than the other groups. This was not a little bit of research. His research cohort covered hundreds of thousands of subjects. Again, it's never been refuted. What they don't tell you with fluoride is, the basic question is, if you're giving someone a medicine, what is the dose that causes the effect you want to see? And if they say 1 part per million, fine. You drink 2 litres of water a day, you drink half a litre, which is 1 part per million. Do you eat vegetables that have been irrigated in fluoridated water and have absorbed fluoride into them? Do you have a cereal that's made from a company that makes these packets in a fluoridated area where again the fluoride is concentrated into the actual product? You don't know. And the other thing that's never answered is, how much fluoride are you actually getting now from other sources? For instance, it comes naturally in tea. Do they ever measure it? So they say, this is the dose we want, and this is the dose you're getting. No, it doesn't. In the last century, industry released 25 million tons of fluoride and fluoride compounds into the environment. However, it's not all bad news. According to the American Dental Association, dentists who practice in fluoridated areas earn substantially more than dentists who work in non-fluoridated areas. Now, you don't have to be exactly a rocket scientist to connect the dots up here. If fluoride was such a good thing reducing tooth decay, then why do dentists in fluoridated areas earn more? And the answer is fluoride, in fact, has an enzyme disruptor, damages teeth. Not only do you get fluorosis in teeth, which are, they say, just a cosmetic alteration, but remember, teeth are really part of your bones. If you've got fluoride causing fluorosis and weakness in the teeth, then what happens to the bones? I haven't even touched on hip fractures yet. So on that happy note, and then I'm just a warm-up back to the main event. I'd like to thank Apu for inviting me, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. We've got now our third speaker, Joy Warren. Joy Warren, she comes from Coventry, and she's got a honours degree in environmental science and certificate of education in health and nutrition. Now, Joy, armed with her education and experience and a good deal of outrage, she decided to be very active against water fluoridation, and she's been very active in her area in the last 9 years. In 2010, she set up an organization called West Midlands Against Fluoridation, and she's got a tremendous website to go with it. So, Joy Warren.
I'm the baby of the operation here. The reason I've been at it much longer than I have, I think. I've lit on this issue of water fluoridation and the lack of medical ethics that you see in the practice of water fluoridation. Okay, I'll get used to it. Thank you. Well, there's no such thing as medical ethics when it comes to water fluoridation. There can't be. There just cannot be, because we are being given a compulsorily non-approved medicine. And nobody has ever asked your consent. I've asked the Chief Medical Officer of England 3 times since August 2012 about consent. And this is the reply I got back from one of her civil servants. The requirement for consent applies only to the administration of medicinal products, but they will not come up with any source for that particular statement. But when I look it up on the website, on the internet, patient.co.uk, I see that informed consent applies to all medical interventions. We have the law on our side, and I'll do very briefly on this because I want to talk more about medical ethics. We've got the Medicines Act 1968, section 130, which clearly says any substance given to you to help your health get better is a medicine. And this particular clause was backed up by Lord Judge Chauncey in Scotland in 1983. Now, he said he was satisfied, in his opinion, that no matter what form fluoride was bought by the respondents, that was the lady who took the case to court, that as far as he was concerned, it was a medicine. So now he's in direct contradiction with the Chief Medical Officer for England. Then we have the Medicines Directive 2001, which is slightly amended in 2004, which says that if you're given a medicine which is purported to alter your body physiologically, it is a medicine. It can't be anything else but. And that was actually tested in the ECG, the European Court of Justice, in 2005, where the term functional foods came to light. A functional food is something which is there to medicate you and is to nourish you. But if it medicates you, the medicine law takes precedence over the nourishing laws, as it were, the food laws. So 4 pieces of information there with law, which is there to help us to get through this horrible ravel of stubbornness in the Department of Health. Now, we have to decide what sort of medicine water fluoridation is, or fluoridated water is. And I've come up with the idea that it is prophylactic, which is preventative. And it's a preventative medicine in the same way that vaccines are preventative. But vaccines are licensed, probably clinically tested, but we'll leave that to one side for now. But they also, you need to give your consent to having a vaccination. And there's no law in this land that says you must be vaccinated compulsorily. So why should you have water in your body which contains fluoride, which is also a preventative? It doesn't make sense. You've got vaccinations, yes, you must give consent. Fluoridated water, no, you don't have to. Under the NHS Constitution, you have the right to accept or refuse treatment. You can say, I do not want it. They may not listen to you, but you have the right. And that's what the postcard campaign is over there. We send the cards off to that nice Sir David Nicholson at the Department of Health. And we're also telling the Chief Medical Officer that 1,000 cards have already gone in. That's quite a lot, believe me, so a lot of work going into those. We need to tell them, we need to be given information up front about the proposed treatment, the proposed medicine. They're not doing that, and they're not going to give it to you now when they decide to put it back in the water supply. You have never been asked for your consent, even back in 1978, I think, when it first came into the water in Bedford. Nobody asked you, and they're not going to ask you again. And it's disgusting, really is a sham. And the fact that you can give your consent or refuse it is in accord with the European Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine. And this is a really good one. It's not a directive as such, but it will be one day. And we look at Article 5. A person shall beforehand be given appropriate information as to the purpose and nature of the intervention. An intervention in the health field may only be carried out after the person concerned has given free and informed consent to it. This is something that I really like from Europe. A lot of stuff coming out of Europe is really bad. This is excellent, and so many countries in Europe have signed this convention. But guess what? The UK and the Irish Republic have failed to. I wonder why. Then we have the Charter on Human Rights, Article 8. It has been proven, it's been upheld, that Article 8 upholds our stance. We should not have a medicine in our lives which, believe it or not, disrespects our private and family life. But this has actually been proven for us. And the judge has said yes. Joel Dobler, the guy who took the case to court, was told, yes, Article 8 is in your favour. However, we think that the poor children who get death and decay take precedence. So on the principle of proportionality, which I like to use a lot, I'm afraid we're going to overturn it. So poor Joel Dobler went away with his tail between his legs. However, in 2003, the Grand Council of Basel-Stadt in Switzerland reversed the decision in its own favour, leaving only the ruling that Article 8 had been satisfied. So, in other words, we still have Article 8 if they don't invoke the proportionality principle. I don't see how they can now, because Basel-Stadt decided it didn't want to know anymore about fluoridation. Now then, if we've actually determined that fluoridated water is a medicine, then we have to look at the General Medical Council. And they're very strong on medical ethics. And if it's a medicine, then you have to be very careful with it. You can't just give it to anybody without having it be approved, licensed, clinically tested, and without a doctor really thinking about your own individual personal health. However, there are 6.25 million of us who are fluoridated, so an individual doctors can't give 6.25 million prescriptions. So, as far as I can see, the responsibility lands at the feet of the Chief Medical Officer for England. And in her case, she definitely is doing harm because she's ignored some letters I've sent, just sort of mere frippery letters, I don't think, very long ones actually, where I've pointed out to her certain things about health. And I haven't made it quick because, if you tell them about telephoresis, you'd think they'd know about it. Do they? I don't know. I have no evidence that she has, in fact, looked at the issues. We know that about 1% of fluoridated individuals are suffering from side effects of fluoridation. We know about the reduction of ATP energy in each cell of our bodies because of fluoride. We know it's a developmental neurotoxin. We have the EPA in America, for that classification. Environmental Protection Agency has classified fluoride as a developmental neurotoxin. It's a very strong database. And we know it produces intelligence. And we also know it produces carcinogens into our body. How many of you know that in the hydrofluorosilicic acid there is arsenic? They are deliberately putting arsenic in your water supply because they can't get it out. They can't stop putting it in because the company which is supposed to purify the stuff doesn't take it down to a certain level. But in fact, in America, it's 0 level for arsenic. But in this country, it's 10 micrograms, which is a very small amount. But in parts of West Midlands, it's approaching 10. But in most parts it isn't. But even so, it's being augmented by water fluoridation. How dare they put arsenic in our water supply? But it has happened.
I think the best thing would be, it would be better that if we actually keep our questions now, and then when we have panels, then
All right. So the next medical effort is to tailor care to the needs of the individual. 6.25 million of us. Each doctor we go to should tailor the medicine to our needs. It's not being done. It's being done en masse by the Chief Medical Officer for England, who is sort of responsible for medical ethics for Public Health England, because she has got the publications, and she was in charge of public health before April, and she still is in charge of the medical civil service. So she is taking on herself, I better give her a name, haven't I? I keep saying she. Professor Dame Sally Claire Davis. She should be deregistered 6.25 million times. Really, because she's asking about our age, medical condition, history, occupation, current medical medication, and all this synergy that goes on between medication and fluoride in our bodies. Nothing's being asked. And look at this, the continuing treatment after the need, in inverted commas, has finished. If you haven't got any teeth, you don't need the stuff, because you're not going to get decayed teeth. If you're an unborn child, you haven't got any teeth. If you're a 6-month-old child, you haven't yet grown your teeth. So why are babies, the unborn child and the adult getting this stuff? Having pointed out to Dr. Davis all these things, she still hasn't taken it on board, unfortunately. And she should be looking at CPD, continuing professional development. I'm not convinced that she's looked at anything, because all I get back are little short quotes of letters from one of her civil servants. There's nothing there to say that she has read my letters. They've wafted them in front of her face, apparently. So, again, I don't think she's taken it seriously. She hasn't done the CPD. and informed consent and looking at medical research. Nobody here was asked in 1978 whether they wanted to be fluoridated. They just did it. Nobody in this country has ever been asked who is currently fluoridated if they consent. That's scandalous. It's your bodies. You're allowed to do with them what you want to do. You should not have any medicine going into them. You should want. Pregnant women, apparently, I've read this in a really good book by a very famous commentator on pregnancies, that you get 50% more blood in your body when you're pregnant, which means you need more liquid. And if you live in a fluoridated area and you don't have much money coming in, the chances are you're going to be drinking tap water. So the unborn child is going to get far more fluoridated water going through, fluoride going through the placenta into the body, into the fetal body and into the fetal brain. There is no blood-brain barrier in the fetus. The fluoride does get into the brain. And this is where we get the reduction in intelligence. The British National Formulary is like a Bible for pharmacists. And in the fluoride section, you have got infants living in an area where there's between 0 and 0.3 milligrams of fluoride per litre of water should not be prescribed fluoride supplements. Now, you probably wouldn't give a baby under 6 months a fluoride supplement, but this is just the principle. Bear with me now. Infants under 6 months were fed the baby formula using fluoridated tap water, getting 1 part per 3 times, 1 to 3 times more than is recommended in the British National Formulary. Don't think they're talking to each other somehow. And bottled water. Well, what can I say about bottled water? We know it doesn't have much fluoride in it. If it does, it will be very, very small amount. I've done a survey of sodium and sulfates in tap water and in all the common bottled water brands. And when I did an ordering from little down to a lot, I found the tap water right at the bottom with more sodium and sulfates in it. And I bet the bottom was Badwar, but I don't think you give a baby Badwar because it's a pretty strong sort of mineral water. The NHS Choices website isn't telling the truth. They want mothers to have tap water and keep away from bottled water. We'll leave to one side for a moment the plastics problem with plastic bottles and the BPA, bisphenol A. But we're just looking at the fluoride thing here. So, fluoridated tap water contains fluoride and arsenic, and mothers are being encouraged to have fluoridated tap water for the baby formula. Well, I think that's a pretty bad piece of advice. And now we get the mass medication. And of course it's mass medication. I don't think that's an emotive statement. It's mass because it's 6.25 million people. And it's medication because it's medicine. So, I mean, how do you guys feel about being mass medicated? It shouldn't happen in a democracy in this day and age. But it is happening. And the CMO is responsible. Because she hasn't looked for years. And none of her predecessors have looked either. So, it's an illegal, non-clinically tested, non-licensed medicine. Several medical ethics have been violated. And parents have been given this information. And our rights under the NHS Constitution are being ignored. So what we're going to do about this, after 3 letters to the CMO for England, and I was fast losing my temper, I just pushed in a complaint to the General Medical Council last week. And we looked at the medical ethics side of things. You know, it's health damaging, but we should be looking at a doctor like Professor Sally Claire Davis, who has studied medical ethics when she was learning to be a doctor. She's GMC registered. So she should be upholding medical ethics. And we'll just watch the spot and see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you very much. Now, the last speaker
to introduce you to Sir Professor Paul Conant. Paul is recognized as the world's leading expert on fluoride toxicology. He has spent the past 16 years researching the effects of fluoride on human health and the environment. He is an executive director of the Fluoride Action Network, a not-profit-making organization. It's a coalition of citizens and scientists working towards broadening awareness about the harmful consequences of community water fluoridation. Professor Conant is co-author of the book Case Against Fluoridation: How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water, the Bad Science and the Powerful Politics. He has published it in 2010. He has given presentations of the dangers of fluoridation to a very large number of countries, including Australia, Canada, Germany, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, UK, and obviously US. He holds his first degree in natural science from Cambridge, and then he went on to do his PhD in chemistry from Dartmouth College. He taught environmental chemistry and toxicology at St. Lawrence University, Canton in New York State, and for the last 23 years, and he resides there. I've got absolutely nothing in common with Paul Conant, but we share one very interesting thing, and we passionately love the music and poems of Rabindranath Tagore, who was a first Asian Nobel laureate in literature. So that's the only thing we do share. And cricket as well. Professor Paul Conant. Thank you.
Yes, I remember that thrilling moment when I opened the door at 39, whatever that road is, Bushmead, whatever, and there in the distance, there was a picture of Rabindranath Tagore, and that was exciting, very exciting, and it's exciting to be back, and very exciting, and this is unusual for me, to follow three other excellent speakers who've laid the groundwork fantastically well, and they will make my job very easy. So, let's talk about affecting change, because that's what we've got to do. We've got to change policy here, not just in Bedford, but throughout the UK and throughout the world. Affecting change is like driving a nail through a piece of wood. The experts can sharpen the nail, but they can't push the nail through the piece of wood. You need the hammer of public opinion to drive that nail home. So it's absolutely essential that you don't just treat these meetings as entertainment. You have to retain some of the information, if not all, and know where to get more information if you need it, because you're the ones who are critical for achieving this change. I gasped when Stephen said, if you lose, it's lost for 20 years. That has to change. I mean, that's intolerable. Ending fluoridation is as easy as turning off a tap. It's something that we're doing to ourselves. We don't have to do it. But to do that, we need the political will. And to get that political will, we need masses of people, many more people, educated and organized. Very important. You've got great organizers here, so this is good. The best definition of an educated person was given to me when I was 12 years of age at Varndean Grammar School in Brighton by my Latin teacher. He said, an educated person is someone who can entertain his or herself, entertain a friend, and entertain a new idea. And that's the essence of an open mind, entertaining a new idea. What this means is that we have people with big, huge degrees, even professors at universities, who are uneducated by this definition because their minds are closed. And on the other hand, we have people who've hardly left high school, never been near a university. They're highly educated because they've held on to this open mind, this willingness to entertain new ideas. And it's a shocking condemnation of our professional bodies, not only in many English-speaking countries, that their minds are fossilized, completely closed to new information on fluoridation. We have our heroes, our dentist here today. I mean, hats off to you for opening your mind and changing your mind, both on mercury and on fluoride. We need to get more to do that. We have to end fluoridation then, one open mind and one community at a time. I'm not expecting much help from the central government, certainly not in the United States. Now, they work against us, not for us, in many, many issues. I spent 17 years researching this issue, and it culminated in the publication of this book with two fabulous co-authors. They made this book. They got the tone right. They understated, not overstated the issue, and they insisted that every single argument be backed up with the literature. And there are in fact 80 pages of references to support everything in this book. And I had hopes 2.5 years ago that this would raise the level of debate on this issue, because it was understated. And yet, after 2.5 years, there has not been a written response from the promoters of fluoridation. They behave as if this book does not exist. But they still charge us as being anti-science. I'm charged as being anti-science when I spent 17 years of my career studying this issue. And I didn't want it. I didn't want this issue when my wife persuaded me to look at this issue on July the 6th, 1996. I said, "What is it?" She put these papers on my desk. She gave me a cup of tea. I should have smelled a rat there when she brought that cup of tea. I said, "What is it?" And she said, "Fluoridation." I said, "Take that away. These people are crazy." And that's how the United States people are stigmatized. If they oppose fluoridation, they're nutty, they're crazy. But that is self-serving. They have two strategies to force fluoridation. One is to say all the authorities in the world, authority, endorse fluoridation. Endorsements are not science. But the authority says it's okay. And the people that say it's not okay are Looney Tunes. That's a double-pronged attack. And what's it designed to do? It's designed to keep doctors and dentists and scientists and independent thinkers in universities away from this issue. Because no one likes to be embarrassed. And if you're seen even looking slightly at these papers on fluoridation, there's something wrong with you. Well, nothing should be put beyond debates. Nothing should be put beyond investigation in an academic institution. So they too should be ashamed of themselves for letting this happen. Outline. I'm going to talk about why fluoridation should never have started. Much of this ground has been covered. I'm going to talk about 7 publications since 1990 that should have ended this nonsense. You know, they say in science, an ugly fact can destroy a beautiful theory. And I'm going to share with you 7 ugly facts which destroy fluoridation. The politics of fluoridation promotion. Obviously, if science is not doing it, there's got to be some other reason that it continues. A simple way to keep fluoride out of Bedford. Having heard Stephen, I'm not so sure whether it is as simple as I had thought, but I'll share it with you and you can make your own judgment. Communities have stopped fluoridation. There are some very exciting things that have happened over the last few years, and I want to share some of those with you. They really are exciting. Particularly Little Miss Fluorides in Ireland. I'm going to tell you about Little Miss Fluorides. And I've got 2 points. Number 4, how did that happen? Better ways of fighting tooth decay and resources that can help you buttress all you've heard today. So part 1, why fluoridation should never have started. We should never, as it's just been said by Joy, we should never use the public water supply to deliver medicine. Why? Because you can't control the dose that people get. You can't control who gets the medicine. It goes to everyone. It violates the individual's right to informed consent to medicine. Any doctor should be ashamed not to open their mouths and stop this practice. It violates what they learned at medical school, what is in the rubric of the American Medical Association, for example. They go into great depths about informed consent. I don't know how doctors can walk down the street and hold their head up and let the public be mistreated in this way. Fluoride is not a nutrient. There's not one single process, I talk as a biochemist, there's not one single substance, process, anything that's going on in our bodies that require fluoride. Nothing. There is absolutely no justification for swallowing it. On the other hand, there's plenty of justification for not swallowing it, because we know it harms many biological processes, including enzymes and G proteins and many other things in the body. In other words, it doesn't do any good to swallow fluoride if it has the potential to cause harm. Now, they make a big fuss, the promoters, that 1 part per million, about 1 part per million being small. Now, fluoridation promoters say it is small. 1 part per million is just 1 cent in $10,000. Oh, teeny weeny weeny. And 1 inch in 16 miles. Now, a toxicologist would say whether 1 part per million is small or large depends upon the substance. If you were talking about dioxin, it's 1,000,000 times too much. If you were talking about arsenic, it's 100 times the safe drinking water standard in the United States. So it depends what substances you're talking about. If you're an opponent of fluoridation, you would say it's 1 part per million, surprisingly, is very large. And why do I say that? Well, because if you look at the level in mother's milk, what nature determined after millions of years of experimentation to be the best meal for the baby's development has very little fluoride in it. And so a bottle-fed baby, 1 part per million in fact, is 250 times the level in mother's milk, which is 0.004 parts per million. Which means in a fluoridated community, babies are getting 250 times more fluoride if they're bottle-fed. And that also particularly applies to low-income families who cannot afford anything else but tap water to make up that formula. The chemicals used, you heard from our dentist, are not pharmaceutical grade. They're actually obtained from the scrubbing system of the phosphate fertilizer industry. They can't dump these into the sea by international law. They can't dump them locally. They're too darn concentrated. But one of the vagaries of hazardous waste regulations in the United States is that if someone buys a hazardous waste from you, it's no longer classified as a hazardous waste. It becomes a product. And under those circumstances, we can put it in the drinking water. And again, as Joy pointed out, one of the things that it contains is arsenic. And arsenic is a known human carcinogen. There is no safe level for arsenic. Right down to 1 molecule, you can cause cancer with arsenic. And therefore, it's inevitable that you will be increasing cancer rates. We heard a discussion about fluoride may cause cancer. But we know arsenic causes cancer, and we know that usually arsenic is present in the fluoridating chemicals that we're using. Well, an article has just been published in the United States by Dr. William Hersey and Dr. Robert Carlton, both former risk assessment specialists from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And this is the title of the paper, but basically what they did is they calculated how much arsenic was in this material, and also based upon standard procedures worked out what the increased cancer rate would be. And what they found is that the use of these fluoridating chemicals in the United States would cause from 320 to 1,800 extra arsenic-induced cancers per year. Then they worked out how much this would cost the community, because the only thing we care about in the United States is money! Money! They cost a lot of money. It costs between $1 and $6 million to treat these estimated cancers. And then they did something very cute. They said in that case, you can actually afford to switch from hexafluorosilicic acid to pharmaceutical grade sodium fluoride. In other words, it's cheaper. It's cheaper as far as society is concerned to use the pharmaceutical grade and not the hexafluorosilicic acid. That's published this year. Now, you should know that most countries do not fluoridate their water, but guess what? Their teeth, the children's teeth, are as good, if not better, than those that do fluoridate. Now, they sometimes say that, oh, that's because European countries have different delivery systems, they put fluoride in their salt. But only 4 of these countries put fluoride in their salt. So the vast majority of European countries neither fluoridate their water nor their salt. So let's look at their tooth decay. This is tooth decay according to the World Health Organization. And you see that tooth decay in 12-year-olds is coming down as fast in the fluoridated countries as the non-fluoridated, or the other way around. They're coming down as fast in the non-fluoridated as the fluoridated, and if you look at the tooth decay today, in the 2000s, it's a wash. And here we have 4 countries which are fluoridated, and about 12 that are non-fluoridated. And 1, England, with 10% of the population fluoridated. So no difference in tooth decay. Part 2. Okay, so now we're going to get into the recent publications which should have forced an end to water fluoridation. An ugly fact can destroy a beautiful theory. Ugly fact number 1. Brunel and Carlos in 1990 published one of the largest surveys of tooth decay in American children that's ever been done in the United States. They looked at 39,000 children in 84 communities. And basically, this is financed by the government, the National Institute of Dental Research. It cost about $4 million. And basically, they were trying to get the evidence that would show once and for all that fluoridation actually works and reduces tooth decay. Well, what they found is that there were the average in the permanent teeth of the average child, aged 5 to 17, in the fluoridated communities, 2.8 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. In the non-fluoridated communities, it was 3.4. Do the arithmetic. Subtract 2.8 from 3.4, and the gigantic saving in tooth decay is 0.6 of a tooth surface. That's the average from children aged 5 to 17. Now, to put that into perspective, by the time all the teeth have come out in a child's mouth, there are 128 tooth surfaces. And we are saving 0.6 of one tooth surface out of 128. This is the magnificent saving that we are struggling for, forcing this on communities all over the world to achieve this. And this is the best. Studies since then have found even less of a saving. And before we get too excited about 0.6 of a tooth surface, the authors didn't even show that this was statistically significant. People should have smelled a rat there. This is a government-funded study, a major study, and they didn't do the statistical analysis to demonstrate this was statistically significant. Well, Kathleen Thiessen did do the statistics last year and found it was not statistically significant. So not only have we got a small saving, that is not even statistically significant. And of course, if we produced a study like that, they would chuck it straight away, right into the dustbin. Ugly fact number 2. CDC in 1999 conceded what many dental researchers have been reporting for the previous 10 years, that the predominant action of fluoride is topical joint management, and I know our dentist mentioned that. And here's the exact quote: fluoride carries preventive properties initially were attributed to changes in enamel during tooth development. This is under the gums, the teeth under the gums before they erupt. However, laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the tooth into the mouth, and its actions primarily are topical. That should have ended fluoridation right there. Why swallow fluoride and expose every tissue to a known toxic substance, when in fact, if you want fluoride, you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out? It's common sense. I think the average citizen in this country would accept that would be the rational thing to do. And it also solves the medical ethics problem, because if you use that strategy, then you're not forcing it on people that don't want it. So you solve the medical problems and the ethical problems simply by changing the delivery system, which is what most of the civilized world has done. But not Britain, not Ireland, not Australia, not New Zealand, not the United States, not Israel. Ugly fact number 3. Can you remember this? I'm going to have a quiz at the end. How many of you can remember these 7 ugly facts, okay? Ugly fact number 3 was the United States National Research Council published the results of a 3-year review of fluoride's toxicity. This, what I refer to as NRC 2006, this is the Bible of toxicology on fluoride. It's a magnificent work. It's 500 plus pages, 1,100 references. They expected to do this in 1 year, but it took them 3. And for the first time, the really important information about this study was the panel. For the first time in the history of fluoridation, they chose, at least in the United States, chose a panel that was balanced. They had 3 anti-fluoridation people on this panel, 3 pro-fluoridation, and 6 who had not declared publicly a position. And they had to thrash this out, and they finally produced this document. Now, there's no question that they found that fluoride causes harmful effects. Fluoride causes harmful effects. So let's at least solve that problem. There's no question that fluoride damages health. It's damaged the health of millions of people in India and China and other places that have high natural level of fluoride. So, yes, they don't even debate that. They don't discuss that. But that's important to know. So the real issue is whether the doses that we are going to get, drinking fluoridated water and getting fluoride from the other sources that other speakers have talked about, is there an adequate margin of safety between the doses which we know cause harm and the doses that we are likely to get? And is that margin of safety sufficient to protect everyone? Not the average person, everyone. And that everyone includes babies. It includes children. It includes sick people. It includes people with poor kidney function. It includes elderly people. Does it protect? Do we have an adequate margin of safety to protect the whole population? And the answer is, in my view, and I challenge any toxicologist to give me the evidence that I'm wrong, is the answer is no. And I'll give you an example in a moment with an IQ study where it's clear that the level that causes harm indicates no adequate margin of safety for our children drinking fluoridated water. In this same book, the chapter 2 is an exposure analysis, a calculation of what the different subsets of the population are getting in terms of fluoride, and they concluded there are subsets of the population drinking fluoridated water at 1 part per million who are exceeding the EPA's safe reference dose, which is 0.06 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. So when they say, oh, you don't have to worry about the National Research Council report, because they only dealt with high concentration, they only dealt with levels at 4 parts per million. Poppycock! They say in black and white in chapter 2 that certain subsets of the population are exceeding safe reference doses drinking water at 1 part per million. Ugly fact number 4. Fluoridation may actually be killing a few young boys. Not many, just a few young boys each year may be killing them. So what's the evidence for that? This is a study done by a dentist at Harvard University called Elise Bassett. She found that young boys exposed to fluoridated water in their 6th, 7th, or 8th years had a 5 to 7-fold increased risk in developing osteosarcoma by the age of 20. And osteosarcoma is frequently fatal in young men. They either have their limbs cut off or they die. Her 2006 study has never been refuted. It's recognized as the methodology is an excellent one. It's never been refuted, even though her advisor in 2006, when the paper came out in the journal, he wrote to the journal a letter saying, my study is going to show that this study doesn't hold. And in Southampton, the Strategic Health Authority had the gall to treat that letter, that unpublished, unpeer-reviewed study, just mentioned in a letter as if it was a study refuting BASF. Well, that was supposed to come out in the summer of 2006. It didn't appear. It didn't appear. Year after year after year, we're waiting for this, and eventually, in 2011, it comes out. Kim et al., and it in no way refuted BASF's study. And it couldn't. The reason it couldn't is the measure of exposure was fluoride levels in the bones. And there's no way you can use a fluoride level in the bones in autopsy or biopsy when the child is diagnosed with this to predict what the level was in this 6th, 7th, and 8th years. And if you can't do that, then you can't refute BASF's study. Amazing. But it helped the Strategic Health Authority get over that little hurdle in Southampton. Ugly fact number 5. Don't you think if you're killing people with this practice, somebody might stop? I mean, this is a fairly ugly fact. Ugly fact number 5. Warren, no relation to Joy, in 2009, this is part of the famous Iowa study that has cost the US taxpayer millions of dollars. They are following children from birth, and they've been doing it for many, many years. And what they did was they set out to find the optimal dose of fluoride to reduce tooth decay. How many milligrams a day of fluoride does a child have to take to reduce tooth decay? So they took this whole cohort, they calculated for every child how much fluoride they were getting every day from water, from toothpaste, from their food supply, etc., etc., etc. Very carefully done. And what did they find? They found no relationship between tooth decay and the amount of fluoride that was ingested. Now that's a little bit of a shocker if you want people to drink fluoridated water, and one of the best studies on tooth decay yet, in terms of science, actually can't find a relationship, and the authors in the end said they can't define an optimal dose of fluoride to reduce tooth decay. Isn't that wonderful? We've got a medicine now that the best experts can't tell you how much you need to take to have the effect. Well, okay, this is what the authors actually said. These findings suggest that achieving a caries-free status may have relatively little to do with fluoride intake. Ugly fact number 6. The CDC in 2010 confirms that American kids are being hugely overexposed to fluoride. Now, you should know that the early promoters of fluoridation saw a trade-off. They thought if you put fluoride in the water, 1 part per million, you would reduce tooth decay, but the trade-off is about 10% of the kids will get dental fluorosis, which is a mottling discoloration of the enamel. But the good news was it would only be in the very mild form, which only dentists would notice, not parents, not children. So it was considered an acceptable trade-off. 1945. Let's run the clock forward to 2010. This is a study from the Center of Disease Control. the biggest promoter of fluoridation in the United States. And what they found is that 41% of American children aged 12 to 15, including kids that don't even live in fluoridated communities, had some form of dental fluorosis. 28.5% had very mild, and 8.6% had mild, and 3.6% had moderate or severe. 4 times what they had anticipated. Why? Because we're getting fluoride from all these other sources. Okay, let's have a look at it. This is very mild dental fluorosis, which impacts up to 25% of the tooth surface. That is, if you like, the worst, at the end of the worst range for dental fluorosis. Some children, they're very mild. You'll see little white cusps at the edge, the cutting edge of the teeth, usually in the corners. That's very mild. But at the other end of the range, it's up to 25%. Now, 28.5% have that condition. But what about mild? 8.6% of American children have this, which is up to 50% of the tooth surface impacted. And now you've got something which is very visible, and especially when it becomes discolored with staining. And then look here, 3.6% moderate or severe, and that's what that looks like. 100% of the tooth surface impacted. 3.6% of our kids have this. Now, there's 2 ways of approaching it. The proponents of fluoridation say this is just a cosmetic effect. Toxicologists, biochemists say this is an indicator that the child has been overexposed to fluoride, that we are seeing here the first toxic effects of fluoride. So a key question, when fluoride is damaging the baby's growing tooth cells, that is a systemic effect. It's an effect from the inside of the body. What is it doing to the other developing tissues? An argument raised by Graham, our dentist, who said the teeth grow out of the bones. If you see damage in the teeth, what about damage in the bones? So, ugly fact number 7, the ugliest fact of all, that should have stopped fluoridation in its tracks. A large body of literature shows that fluoride damages the brain. Now let me tell you how you can access this large body of literature, because my wonderful son Michael has made it all accessible for you. You go to our webpage, fluoridealert.org. On the top right-hand corner, you see the word researchers. Click on researchers, and you get a whole menu of things. Look for the one that says health database. And when you get to the health database, you'll see fluoride's impact on every tissue, and you'll see one, fluoride and brain effects. Click on that, and you'll get the following information, and everything documented and referenced. Over 40 animal studies show that prolonged exposure to varying levels of fluoride can damage the brain. Over 40 studies. There are 19 animal studies report that mice or rats ingesting fluoride have an impaired capacity to learn and remember. 19. We have 12 studies, 7 human and 5 animal, that link fluoride with neurobehavioral deficits. We have 3 human studies which shows that fluoride damages the fetus, fetal brain damage. And we have, out of 43 published studies, 37 that investigated this issue, 37 out of 43 published studies show that fluoride lowers IQ. Now, I want to look at one animal study, because usually the promoters dismiss all these animals. Oh, they've done it at very high concentrations. Okay, let's look at one at 1 part per million. This study, they fed rats water with 1 part per million fluoride in it for 1 year. And what they found was kidney damage, brain damage, visible under the microscope, and a greater uptake of aluminium into the brain and beta amyloid deposits which are characteristics of dementia, possibly Alzheimer's disease. 1 part per million. IQ studies. As I said, 37 out of 43 published studies, mostly from China, and 1 or 2 from Iran, India, and Mexico, indicate that moderate to high exposure to fluoride is associated with lower IQ in children. This is a study I'm particularly familiar with because I went to the villages in China where the study was done. It was a very well-controlled study, and in the interest of time, I will just say that there was a drop of 5 to 10 IQ points across the whole range, age range, and a shift in the IQ curve. So this is the IQ curve. The blue curve is the low fluoride village, less than 0.7 parts per million. And the dotted magenta curve is the high fluoride village, which was between 2.5 and 4.5 parts per million. And Zhang estimated that the threshold for this effect, the lowest level, which you could see had this effect, was 1.9 parts per million in the water. And here we have what I warned you about. This finding offers no adequate margin of safety to protect all our children in a large population from 2 things: the range of doses and the range of sensitivity that you can anticipate in a large population. So first of all, let's do the easy one. A child drinking 2 litres of water, 1 part per million, will get a dose of 2 milligrams per day. 1 part per million is 1 milligram per litre. 2 litres is 2 milligrams, right? Now, one of those Chinese children that was drinking 1 litre of water at 1.9 parts per million is getting a daily dose of 1.9 milligrams per day. So one of the things which is that the promoters of fluoridation, I think, willfully confuse is the difference between concentration and dose. So they say things like, oh, 1.9 is 2 or 3 times higher than we put in the water, forgetting that if you had 2 communities, one drinking 1 part per million, one drinking 1.9 parts per million, there would be an overlap in dose. So we're not protecting our children based upon this study. And then, as far as protecting to protect the most sensitive person in a large population, what we do is divide the dose, the lowest dose that causes harm, by 10. That's called the intraspecies variation factor. And we assume that some kids are going to be 10 times more sensitive than others. So we divide by 10. Well, what dose were the Chinese children getting? Well, we don't know. But we can do a little range calculation. I'm saying, what if the kids drank a half a litre a day? That would be half of 1.9 milligrams, 0.95. What if they drank 1 litre a day? Well, they get 1.9 milligrams a day. And what if they drank 2 litres of water a day? Well, 3.8. I think that's a reasonable range. It's probably, there are some children getting less than that, some children getting more. That's a reasonable ballpark calculation. So now, the bottom dose then, for this lowering of IQ, if these kids got between 0.95 and 3.8 milligrams per day, divide by 10 to get the safe dose for our kids, and we're talking about a range of 0.095 to 0.38 milligrams per day. Let's take the highest end of that range. A kid would get that in 1.5 glasses of fluoridated water. So there's no protection here to protect all our children from the range of dose. There's no protection here. There's no margin of safety to protect the whole range of sensitivity that we can expect. Now, again, what they typically do is to chuck out all our studies and say they're junk science, only available on the internet, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, a team from Harvard University studied 27 of these studies. They did a meta-analysis. They took all the ones with the same methodology, comparing IQ between high fluoride villages, low fluoride villages, and did an average. The study was published in Environmental Health Perspectives. That's important for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the leading environmental health journal in the world. And number 2, it's published by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is part of the National Institute of Health, whose policy is to promote fluoridation. So it's right under their noses. They can't ignore this one. Now, the Harvard authors acknowledged that there were weaknesses in the methodology. There's no question about that. There are many things we would want to improve, more information that we would need. But they also say these results are remarkably consistent, considering they're taken from many, many different parts of China with different geography, etc., from 4 different countries. The results were remarkably consistent. 26 out of the 27 studies found a lowering of IQ, and the average reduction is about 7 IQ points, which is significant. And again, they concluded that further investigation of fluoride's lowering of IQ should be a high research priority. But don't hold your breath on that, because that's what the National Research Council said in 2006. And how many studies on IQ have we seen in fluoridated countries like Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Israel, Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom? 0. None. They prefer just to criticize the methodology. I say, if your methodology is so darn good, you do the studies. You do them where it counts in this country, in America, etc. Anyway, the promoters, their strategy has been to say, oh, well, those studies were all done at high concentrations. And they pulled out a couple of studies where the range went up to 11 parts per million. Again, me telling you that these people know nothing about toxicology. Because when you have a range of studies, you don't look at the highest dose that causes harm. You look at the lowest dose that causes harm. So if the 11 parts per million was irrelevant, but in actual fact, at least 8 of the studies, the high fluoride village was less than 3 parts per million. No margin of safety there. One was actually less than 1 part per million, and I told you about the Zhang with the threshold of 1.9. So again, these studies, many of these studies, offer no adequate margin of safety. Dr. Philip Grandjean is world famous for his work on mercury. He did the study in the Faroe Islands, which showed that women that ate a lot of fish, the mercury lowered the children's IQ. So he's big on IQ. He says fluoride seems to fit in with lead, mercury, and other poisons that cause chemical brain drain. The effect of each toxicant may seem small, but the combined damage on a population scale can be serious, especially because the brain power of the next generation is crucial to all of us. He's just published a book, Only One Chance, it's called. It's about this subject. And I want to illustrate graphically what he's talking about when he talks about an impact on a population level. So this graph here is a typical normal distribution curve, what we call the bell-shaped curve, which is looking at the whole population, and you find that most kids have an average IQ around about 100. But you have on this graph 2 tails. Now this tail here, the area that I've shaded in green, that is the total number of kids in your population who are very, very bright. That's where we find our geniuses, okay? And over here, an IQ less than about 70 is children, unfortunately, who are mentally handicapped. And that area under the curve represents how many of those in any population. This is absolutely standard. This is mathematics. You can apply this to any community. Okay. Now, if we were to shift the IQ of the average, shift the whole IQ curve over by 5 IQ points, which is what they did in the Zhang study, you won't notice this change here. A parent with 2 kids, where the IQ differed by 5 IQ points, the parent wouldn't know. A school teacher wouldn't know. You wouldn't see it walking down the street. You wouldn't tell. But I want you to see now what Grandjean was talking about. Look what happens to the 2 tails when you make this modest shift of 5 IQ points in your whole population. You halve the number of geniuses in your society. You double the number of mentally handicapped. That has huge ramifications for society and for the economy. To halve the number of geniuses in your society, to double the number of mentally handicapped. The politics of fluoridation promotion. I think you need a laugh. So here's the ADA white paper. I want you to see the lack of integrity and the lack of science from these. This is the #1 promoter of fluoridation, ADA, American Dental Association. This is what they wrote in 1979. Individual dentists must be convinced that they need not be familiar with scientific reports and field investigations on fluoridation to be effective participants, and that non-participation is over neglect of professional responsibility. Have you ever seen a more upside-down definition of professionalism in your life? You don't have to be on top of your subject to go out and promote this. And if you don't, you're not meeting your professional obligations. Unbelievable. And then this tells you how absolutely gullible journalists and editors and public health spokesmen throughout the world are. Because in 1999, the CDC claimed that fluoridation was one of the great public health achievements of the 20th century. And this statement is cited nearly every day, some country in the world, as if it was, you were quoting Genesis. This was in the Bible. That fluoridation is one of the top 10, one of the great public health achievements of the 20th century. Well, where does this come from? Well, it comes from the Oral Health Division of the CDC, whose job is to promote fluoridation. There's only 30 of them. How many people wrote this paper? Only 2. One was a dentist who'd never written anything on fluoridation before. His expertise is smokeless tobacco. And the other one was an economist. So, these are the 2 people that wrote the study which underpins this claim. But it gets worse. Let's look at the result. They were 6 years out of date on the health studies. They cited the National Research Council review from 1993 as the basis of claiming that there were no health problems. Now, what would happen to me if I was 6 years out of date? What would happen to Steve if he was 6 years out of date? This is the Center for Disease Control. The #1 health protection agency in the United States is 6 years out of date on the health studies to support the claim that fluoridation is one of the great public health achievements of the 20th century. Also, and you're going to laugh at this, look at the trivial evidence that they provide that fluoridation actually reduces tooth decay. Here's a graph. This shows in 12-year-olds, this is the blue line, that tooth decay is coming down in the United States from the 60s to the 90s, and at the same time, the red line is going up. And that red line is the percentage of the American population that's drinking fluoridated water. And voila! The blue line is coming down because the red line is going up. If a student of mine tried to pull a trick like that, they would fail. I mean, so are the sale of telephone books, for goodness sake. And bicycles, they're all going up in this period. And to assume that blue line is coming down because the red line is going up is pathetic. But it's worse than that, because I showed you the graph before. They should have known, should they not, that the World Health Organization was collecting exactly the same data for 12-year-olds in all these countries. By the way, the red line there is the American line, the line that was on that graph. And so if they had looked at the World Health Organization data, they wouldn't have made such a preposterous claim. So you've got a straight choice here. I think somebody else said you said it. Graham. They're either incompetent or they're frauds. If they knew the World Health Organization's data was there, then that was clearly deceiving the American public. Now I want to show you this. You're going to love this. This is an episode of Monty Python. Are you ready for it? The Queensland Scam. When Anna Bligh was appointed Premier of Queensland, one of the first things she did was to introduce mandatory fluoridation in Queensland. And Queensland had resisted fluoridation for years and years and years, while all the other states in Australia had succumbed. And one of the techniques that they used here was to compare tooth decay in the one town that was fluoridated in Queensland, Townsville, with Brisbane, which was one of the many that were non-fluoridated. And what they said in full-page ads is that in Townsville, water supplies have been fluoridated since 1964, resulting in 65% less tooth decay in children. I want you to imagine what 65% less tooth decay would actually look like if you stared into the mouths of these children. Okay, we'll be thinking about that, because now we're going to see the actual data on which this is based. It turns out that they chose data for one age only, 7 years of age, with the arrow. The DMFS, decayed, missing and filled surfaces, that's what Brunel and Carlos mentioned, 0.09 in fluoridated Townsville, 0.26 in unfluoridated Brisbane. Do the subtraction. It's a saving of 0.17. So we're talking about a saving of 0.17 of a tooth surface. What if they put that in the full-page ads? Now, there's nothing wrong with the arithmetic, right? It does actually work out that this saving of 0.17, when you do the arithmetic, is a 65% difference. But this is an outrageous example of cherry picking, which is a real no-no in science. Because if they looked at the 9-year-olds, look at the 9-year-olds, they're exactly the same calculation. The saving is 0.1 of a tooth surface, and that equates to 20% reduction. Outrageous manipulation. But this is from civil servants. This is not from political hacks. This is civil servants who are paid a large salary, Queensland Health, to protect people's health. And here they're stupid to propagate. Literally propagate. You said it. It's fraud. Now, it gets worse. Can it get worse than this? Yes, it can. Here's what teeth look like exposed to fluoridated water. Queensland Health, 2007. And this is what teeth look like in exposed to non-fluoridated water. Goebbels would blush, wouldn't he? I mean, is that what teeth look like in Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland? Give me a break. This is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous, but it is funny, so I kept it in. Summary. Fluoridation is unethical. Joy, you nailed it. It's unnecessary, it works topically, you don't need to swallow it, and it poses risks to the brain that far outweigh the meager, if any, benefits to teeth. For those who want fluoride, fluoridated toothpaste is readily available, there is no need to swallow it, and there is no need to force it on people that don't want it. I predict that when I have left town, promoters will accuse me of using junk science. And emotion is a great performer. You've got to admit, he's a great performer. But he doesn't have science, like we do. They will confidently tell you that thousands of studies show that fluoridation is safe and effective. And they won't tell you that once, they'll tell you it again and again and again. And in fact, they've got a little recording that you can play at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Fluoridation is safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. They will produce a long list of organizations that endorse fluoridation. So here is a very simple response when you get this stuff coming at you. I'm talking to the councils now, but the citizens as well. Ask the promoters to produce one single dentist, doctor, scientist, or public health official from any of these prestigious bodies that endorse fluoridation to debate me in public in Bedford. And if you get somebody to accept, I will come back to Bedford, even if I have to pay my own way, I will come back to debate. But I won't lose any money because they will refuse. If their case is as strong as they say, this should be easy for them. Because I've made all the arguments transparent. You can see them on countless videotapes. You can read them in our book. Everything is transparent. Everything is documented. They should be able to crush me like a little ant. And wouldn't you want to crush me like a little ant if you were pro-fluoridation? Wouldn't you have a pain in their butt around the world, rabbiting on like this? And obviously it would be delightful for them to go, that's the end of it. We'll debate it, we'll videotape it, we'll take this videotape and send it around the world. And I know this sounds very personal. Many of our scientists who are opposed to fluoridation to do the same thing. It's just I can't be intimidated. Now, if they agree to debate me, I promise I will return. And then you will see which side is more convincing. Which side can back up their arguments with references to the primary scientific literature, which is what we're supposed to do as scientists, and which back up their arguments with assertions, with authority. If they don't have the confidence to defend fluoridation in open public debate, why should you have any confidence in their endorsements? Okay, you're the council. Why should you have any confidence in these people? Just because he says, I'm the chief medical officer, I'm the chief medical officer, you can. No. Where's the science? And why would you feel then it was justifiable to continue to force this practice on citizens who don't want this medical treatment? Where's the confidence to do that? Where's the confidence for this council, or any council, to medicate the whole population? When A, they don't understand the literature themselves, and the people that they are relying on cannot, after 2 years, respond in writing to my book, or have the guts to come out on a public platform and debate the issue and defend their position. Why should you have confidence in those people? So it's quite simple. If pro-fluoridation people want you to restart fluoridation in Bedford, then let them find someone who can defend their case in open public debate with me, and if they can't defend it, you shouldn't restart it. I said it's very simple. This might work with the public, it might work with the politicians. I know we've got some obstacles to overcome with the whole rubric of the regulations. But I think we first win the issue with the people, with common sense, and with solid argument. Please make sure that Bedford joins the vast majority of cities worldwide that do not fluoridate their water. And let Bedford join the dozens of communities in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States that have stopped fluoridation in recent years. And you can see a complete listing on our webpage, floridalert.org. But just to summarize, in 2008, 19 communities, over 950,000 people were liberated from fluoridation. In 2009, 4 communities, over 140,000 people, were liberated from fluoridation. In 2010, 8 communities, over 129,000 people were liberated. In 2011, 33 communities, over 1.9 million people liberated. 2012, 26 communities, over 780,000 people liberated. And this year, already, 45 communities, over 1.6 million people have been liberated. Now there's been also some wonderful news that's come out. Queensland, after 6 years, has lifted that mandatory fluoridation. And there's been a stampede in Queensland to stop fluoridation. 14 regional councils representing over 50 towns have said either they're stopping fluoridation or they're not going to start. So that's dramatic things in Queensland. Beautiful. In April of this year, the new Minister of Health in Israel, who was a former mayor who had opposed fluoridation in her own community, announced that Israel was going to, in 1 year, would be lifting the mandatory requirement for fluoridation. Not stopping fluoridation, but lifting the mandatory requirement like Queensland. That's something. And then on May 21st, not so long ago, Portland, Oregon voted 61% to 39% to reject fluoridation, despite being outspent 3-1. The opposition raised nearly $1 million to get Portland fluoridated. And how did they spend that money? Listen to this. They were giving $20,000 to different groups representing different communities to support fluoridation. Literally trying to buy the votes of the population. Incredible. But despite that, the citizens prevailed because they were the best organized, the best educated community in recent years that have tackled this issue. And then we have little Miss Fluorides. Look at her. She's got the anti-F t-shirt. That's rather nice. But look what she's got in her hands. On her hands. You might not see it that close. There it is. It's a blue glove that you can get from the kitchen with the anti-fluoridation sign. So these kids go like this. Stop fluoridation. That's it. It's as simple as putting on a blue glove. And we need our kids in Bedford. Get the kids wearing this blue glove. It's simple. Put this blue glove on a little post in your garden. The blue glove. Stop fluoridation. Make it fun. Make it fun. And do you know what's so good about this? Politicians do not like bullshitting children. So when the children get organized and the children get educated, it makes life very much more difficult for the kind of shenanigans. Can you imagine a politician trying to defend that Queensland scam? No. It's difficult with kids. Easy with adults, but not with kids. Better alternatives. If you want fluoride, use fluoridated toothpaste. I haven't used fluoridated toothpaste for 17 years. Better still, use xylitol toothpaste. Xylitol is a natural sugar which prevents the bacteria that convert sugar to acid from sticking to the teeth. If they can't stick to the teeth, they don't survive in the mouth, and you're free of those bacteria. And one of the beautiful things about xylitol, we make it in our own bodies, it's non-toxic for us, is that if you protect the mother, you protect the baby. If the mother is using xylitol toothpaste or sucking xylitol mints, she is then not transmitting the bacteria that cause tooth decay from her mouth to the baby's mouth when she licks the teeth or kisses the baby. And they've been using this for over 30 years in Scandinavia and in Japan. The only downside to this, so be careful, is that some dogs, some strains of dogs are killed by xylitol. So do not give it to your dogs, but more importantly, don't use xylitol chewing gum, because that gets tossed out and then the dog comes along, eats it, and it might kill it. So one of the things they're trying right now in Wichita, Kansas, is they're giving in low-income schools kids to suck on xylitol mints. And they like it. It tastes great. And one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Very simple, but effective. In Scotland, which has no fluoridation, they are giving free toothbrushes, free toothpaste to low-income families, and they're introducing how to clean your teeth, look after your teeth in the school curriculum. They're doing the same thing in northern New Zealand, in the remote areas. Low-income families need better diet and better dental education, less sugar, more brushing. Less sugar, more brushing, more vegetables. Less sugar means less tooth decay and less obesity. Less diabetes, fewer heart attacks. And so when we switch from fluoridation to education, that's the key switch. From fluoridation to education, then we will have a lot of money to call upon if we combine fighting tooth decay with fighting obesity. That's how you get the money from the government to do what we should be doing. And education is a good investment. Resources. If you have several weeks to spend, and you've got a scientific background, this is the Bible. You can get into that. It's very dense. incredibly well referenced. It'll take you a few weeks. If you don't have a few weeks to spend, but you have several days to spend, get this from the library. I'm not interested in selling anything. Get it from the library, or steal it from somebody. That will take you a few days to go through that. Which actually, partly, the driver for this was partly to make the National Research Council report more accessible to the general public. If you only have half an hour to spend, only half an hour, or your friends only have half an hour, then please get them to watch this 29-minute DVD, which is called Professional Perspectives on Fluoridation, where you have 15 scientists from around the world, including a Nobel Prize winner, 2 former employees of the EPA, and 3 members of the National Research Council, plus Sir Ian Chalmers and a few other important people called Warwick, explaining in simple terms why fluoridation is a bad idea. That's probably our best was the best educational tool. But if you've only got 20 minutes to spend, then watch my son's video, which is called 10 Facts on Fluoride, which is beautifully produced, very clear, and it's backed up with a 10-sided, 5-page leaflet which you can run off from the thing. So this is a great package to share with people. 20-minute video plus a booklet. And that's it. Believe it or not, I'm actually finished.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. It was very absolutely inspiring as well as very thought-provoking presentation you have made this evening. We've got now the panelists, and I know that some of you would like to ask questions. I'm sure we can spend 2 more minutes. Graham, you're coming on the stage here. So perhaps, I want to open it up. I'm sure if you'd like to ask questions to any of the panelists, I'm sure they will be able to answer. Just one thing I want to say, that I know the organization, they did ask the mayor to come to this meeting, as well as the Muriel Scott, the director of the public health here in Bedford. I think I understand that mayor is away, and I'm not sure about Muriel Scott. But we do have about 40 councillors in the Bedford Borough Council. I know there are 39 other very busy councillors, so I'm not sure that they have been able to manage to come in this evening. But it would have been nice to have seen some of my colleagues here. So, who would like to start? And it would be great that if you could actually give your name, just tell us who you are, and try to make it short and succinct. Then we will be able to move on quite quickly. The gentleman over there. Take the microphone, please. I've got another one. We have got another microphone here, have we not? Well, so there's the one here. And there's another one. It's all.
Is it? Yeah, that's fine. My name's Richard Gill, I live in Bedford. I understand that these substances are toxic. Just to get an idea how toxic, what's the fatal dose of hexafluorosilicic acid for a healthy adult male, and for the other one, silicon fluoride, sodium fluoride. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's an irrelevant question, because you're not going to get anywhere near the toxic, the lethal dose. And the opposition play this trick on us all the time. They say you have to drink several bathtubs of fluoridated water to get a toxic dose. What they mean is lethal dose. And we're not talking about lethal doses here, we're talking about toxic doses, subtle effects, lowering of IQ, etc., etc. These are serious endpoints. You don't have to kill people to get worried about a toxic substance. So, to answer your question now, having been rude, About a teaspoon will kill an adult of fluoride. It's very toxic.
I know Lee, you wanted to ask a question. Do you want to? Oh, somebody there.
Hi, my name's Johnny from Bedford. I just want to ask, why do you think they're putting the fluoride in the water? Do you believe in any conspiracy theories that it's making the population docile?
No, 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 and please don't even talk about that to your friends. And certainly don't talk about it in public. We have them on the ropes on the science. It doesn't work, it's dangerous.
So why do you think they're doing it? Why do you think? Is it because it's so toxic to get rid of it?
Well, there's a whole book written on this, fortunately. The Fluoride Deception by Chris Bryson, former BBC correspondent and producer. Took him 10 years to write this book. And he nails the issue of why fluoridation started in the United States. And the central thesis is there was collusion between the US Public Health Service and the Fluorine Lawyers Association. And the Fluorine Lawyers Association's single job was to defend industries from lawsuits on fluoride. And there were more lawsuits on fluoride in the 1940s than any other environmental pollutant. In fact, in the 1930s, there was more damage done to agriculture by fluoride than any other air pollutant. So continuing the thesis, not only was this a way of trying to eliminate liabilities by putting fluoride in the water, by putting it everywhere, but it was a way of changing the image of the nastiest, most toxic air pollutant, change that image to something that was safe enough to put on your cornflakes and give to your kiddies. It was a brilliant public relations campaign, and it was partly, I'm not sure just how much involvement he had, but partly involved with Edward Bernays, the father of public relations and propaganda in the United States. He was the guy that came up with like 22,000 dentist smoke vice rights. He had suffragettes walking up Fifth Avenue smoking cigarettes to demonstrate how liberating they were. The man was completely deviant, and he knew how to engineer consent. His words, engineer consent by using authorities, putting people with white coats in front of the camera and selling whatever they wanted to sell, which continues to this day, and it is very much a large part of the promotion of fluoridation. White coats, enough, and authority is enough to persuade many people that this is a great idea. But no conspiracy theories, please. I do not. Another reason not to use them is that I would say that most dentists just simply have not, they've only taught one thing at dental school. Same with doctors, only taught one thing, that this is the best thing since sliced bread. And when they leave dental school and medical school, they're so busy treating patients that, except for heroes like the gentleman at the end there, they don't have enough time or inclination to read the literature. So they step in line, they take what they consider to be a safe route of going along with government policy and professional bodies. They're not evil people, they're neglectful people, and I'm upset with the low standards of the professional bodies which allows this to happen, but they're not evil. They're not trying to dumb down the world's population or even the British population. They're not trying to limit the world's population. And the moment you intimate that, the moment you talk about Hitler using it to dumb down the concentration camp victims, it's insulting to them. And as Stephen pointed out, we're trying to win people over. We're not going to win them by insulting them. So let's stick to the science, stick to the facts, and they will win this for us. We are winning right now. We are really winning right now. It's just a matter of time. We just have to keep on a steady course of honesty, integrity, and accurate science, and we're going to win.
But yeah, I would add just one point. I think let's back up what Paul's just said, that, the people the dental public health profession, the people, the civil servants, they actually believe they're doing a good thing. And note my use of the word believe, because I think that's very, very important. In Paul's right, they are taught that. But it is changing amongst them. I've been, one of the advantages of the work that I do is that I've sat in dental public health conferences and I've worked with people in the Department of Health. But there are people beginning to talk out against water fluoridation, starting to talk about the need to change. And recently, when I was in Scotland, and Paul mentioned partly what they were doing in Scotland, they're doing a little bit more than that, very successfully, demonstrating that they're reducing inequalities. And what you get are a group of people now who are trying to promote a different way of tackling problems in dental health very successfully. And it's those things that will stop eventually water fluoridation as well.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Anybody? Glenn?
My ex-dentist, and I say ex-dentist, I asked the question what he thought about fluoride. And he thought it was very, very good. And I asked him what he knew about fluoride. And he said, well, it's you put it in the water. I said, yes. And he believed it was a medicinal product. He had no idea where the fluoride came from. And it surprises me that they will tout fluoride, but they don't know very much about it. And he's now my ex-dentist.
Well, yes, any professional who does this is really abrogating his professional responsibility. And to have such gross ignorance on one of the fundamental tenets on which basic his education is really a very gross dereliction of his professional views. So I'm very glad he's very extensive. Unfortunately, still other people's dentists are still correcting the same number.
Perhaps we could, Chapman, I've got one here, perhaps we could challenge all dentists to prove that they are keeping up with their CQD duties. Doctors also. Everybody has to do that. Why should dentists?
Any other questions? Yeah, the lady here.
Public speaking.
No problem.
Right. The subject is mercury in amalgam. I cannot understand why it is not banned, only because it's cheaper, I'm told by my dentist.
And your name is?
Linda Timms. Mercury is a deadly poison. I know for a fact that at a local Bedfordshire crematorium that many, many thousands of pounds are being spent from the vaporisation into the atmosphere of amalgam, and I'm talking about a lot of money. I don't know whether it's hundreds of thousands.
Can you put the microphone closer?
Yeah, I know that at a local crematorium in Bedfordshire that the vaporisation from amalgam fillings has to be treated to a large cost to people who live in that area, of course, the rates, as the vapour is damaging the atmosphere and going across even to the seaside in some places. And it is a fact because I have a close family member who deals with it. So why are we doing that and costing ratepayers all that money and costing many, many thousands to treat? They shouldn't.
Well, it's sort of going off the issue a little bit, fluoridation, but I have been involved.
You did mention mercury.
I have been involved with the mercury issue for a long time, and certainly 37 kilometres down Bedford crematorium we actually find the mercury plume in measurable and dangerous quantities. There is EU regulations now that stipulate that crematorium must be fitted with a crematorium over a certain size, with a certain number of cremations per month must be fitted with these filters to take out mercury from the bodies and from the atmosphere. However, mercury has sort of been with us for a long time. And there is the United Nations Environment Programme. I've been involved with them. There's a treaty going to be signed in October this year, which is going to ban mercury and all its products on a worldwide basis. And mercury in the mouth is the only substance that's been specifically mentioned in there. So there are sort of timetables working out for the reduction of mercury worldwide. There was also a report done by the EU called the Concord Report, where it was worked out the environmental cost of amalgam filling. One amalgam filling cost the environment $67 American dollars for environmental damage. So the question is, who pays for that? It's really, you should have the principle in the EU, the polluter pays, and the polluter in this case is the dentist. And so that cost should really be borne to the patient. So if a patient having an amalgam filling should pay the dentist cost plus an additional $67. Science-based, this, not a figure to pluck from the air. $67 for the environmental damage that it causes.
Hello, one time. Yeah. I just want to give you a little bit of history. Some of you I know this, but many probably do not. Mercury amalgams. There was a big battle in the United States in the 1830s, in which you had two groups of dentists. One group of dentists was fighting to use gold for fillings, and the other group of dentists fought for mercury amalgams, this new material. And eventually the group that fought for mercury amalgams evolved into the American Dental Association. So that's where the American Dental Association came from, the promotion of mercury amalgams. And they've been promoting it ever since, from about 1860. So we're talking, what, over 150 years, the ADA has promoted mercury amalgams and have been saying they're safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective for all that time. And they still say that. And what is the issue? The issue is liabilities. Liabilities. You keep denying, because the moment you admit that it causes harm, then you can expect lawsuits. And I believe the same thing is happening with fluoride. Deny. In the case of the American Dental Association, they have their seal of approval on every product that has fluoride in it. A dental product, toothpaste, and so on. In fact, you can't get that seal of approval without having fluoride in the dental product. So you can imagine the liabilities here. If fluoridation falls, then the toothpaste manufacturers are going to have a hit. If it falls because of medical reasons, that fluoride at a certain level lowers IQ, then those toothpaste manufacturers are worried stiff about what it's going to mean for their bottom line when people start the lawsuits. And if it's bigger than just, well, I think lowering IQ is big enough, but if it's other things like hip fractures, it's going to be huge. And a very interesting thing about when we get into the economic interest here, there's two other economic interests that you need to know. In 1949, very important year, because that's 1 year before the US Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation. They endorsed it in 1950, before any trials have been completed, before there's any health studies of any significance that have been published. The US Public Health Service mysteriously endorsed fluoridation. 1 year before that, the sugar lobby, representing 130 different sugar interests, from Coca-Cola to candy to cornflakes, you name it, said, we need to find a way to reduce tooth decay without reducing sugar consumption. For them, fluoride was the magic bullet. They then proceeded to put millions of dollars into prestigious American universities, including Harvard, to set up nutrition departments, to get professors to testify in Congress and go around the country extolling the virtues of sugar as a nutrient, and using phrases like Coca-Cola is a nutritious drink in Congress, and at the same time promoting fluoridation as the best thing since sliced bread. So that's another interest, that's economic interest here. Now the other economic interest is like a bundle of interest. There's an organization in the United States called the American Council on Science and Health. This is an industry-funded group. They've never met a chemical that they didn't like. They push fluoridation like crazy. They attack any politician that comes out, making fun of them if they come out against fluoridation. This ACH, the fact that they are so active today suggests to me that those industries which were in the beginning involved in the forming of fluoridation, according to Chris Bryson, I think they're still around. I think the aluminum industry is still around, the steel industry, the oil industry, they're still worried. But for the same reasoning, if it turns out that 1 or 2 milligrams a day damage health, what does that mean about what they're doing to their workers, exposing them to much higher doses than that? So they too are worried stiff about fluoridation falling. And that's why they have the ACHS out there like a rabid dog attacking people like me.
Thanks, Paul. I think, possibly, are there any questions?
Fine, but we will take the lady right at the back there. And then I'll come to the next one.
My name is Oksana, and it's really a concern. I've been told that fluoridation has stopped in Bedford for about 3 years, but how do we know that it's true? I mean, the companies have been aggressively implementing fluoridation, regardless of what local people want. And if they say it's stopped, how do we know it's actually stopped?
Well, I understand, and the water authority has actually admitted that they haven't done it because of some work. And then the test results show that there was no real significant amount of fluoride in the water.
Is that independently tested, or is it tested by them?
Well, could well be, no, it's tested independently. I think.
Yes, I've got a fluoride testing meter, and when I came down about 2 months ago to Bedford, I visited around a lot of taps and tested the water from those taps and found that, yes, indeed, fluoridation has stopped in Bedford. Thank you very much. Okay.
There are a couple on board here. Franca is in here. Take this too.
Franca Gary, Bedford Visible Group. The one thing that I have to tell all of you is that never mind the human beings, but even dogs don't want the fluoridation in water. We had here one year an exhibition like this, and a lady came near me and said, "My poodle is allergic to fluoride." I said, "Oh yes, I heard that before." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Surely he doesn't know that fluoride is in the water." She said, "I tried everything." And what she had tried, to give him the water without the fluoride, and the water with the fluoride, taken from the tap, another tap, and every time the poodle did refuse the water with the fluoride, he would come out in rush. His skin under the little, fair coat he has, was becoming in red, and so on. So that's it as well. And there she is, giving him bottled water that he wouldn't drink, Bedford water, when we used to have fluoride in it. So keep that in mind, please.
Thanks, Becca. The gentleman over there.
Ivor Houghton, can you say anything about the report by Declan Ward that's just been published, who compared fluoridated Republic of Ireland, Southern Ireland, with unfluoridated Northern Ireland, and looked at the rates of disease and mortality and a whole lot of issues such as osteoporosis and dementia and hypothyroidism, and found something like 2 to 3 times as much of that disease in the fluoridated area as in non-fluoridated Northern Ireland. Do you think this is valid research, and is it useful to us?
Who wants to take?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked through most of Declan's work. I mean, basically, that the type of research he's doing is technically called observational epidemiological studies. So you look at what one whole big population suffers and what another big population suffers. And the degree to which we can give any certainty to those differences is actually quite difficult. I mean, there was a big debate, which Paul would have seen, about heart disease and whether it was the fluoridation contributing to these things or not. What it does do, though, is that it points to, and that's the point that Paul made, we should be investigating these things more. So basically what they are, they're red flags. And you know, when you're kind of a researcher, you look at red flags and you think, actually there's something here that needs to be looked at. But to actually look at it in any kind of real kind of depth, which would substantiate whether those differences are related to water fluoridation or not, is quite difficult. And I've done it a few years ago, I did a very similar thing in England, which does show an association, because that's what we're talking about, between fluoridated areas and the prevalence, i.e. the amount of hypothyroidism. It doesn't actually tell you, doing that it is related, but it would actually mark something you would want to investigate further. And that's what, if we use that kind of data or that kind of research, we will be accused of doing that. Having said that, the pro-fluoridationists do this all the time. I mean, Paul gave a good example. Well, in this area there's less tooth decay than in this area, because this area's got fluoridation and this one hasn't. Therefore, it must be fluoridated. Because it could be any kind of factors. It could be what people eat, it could be whether they brush their teeth every day. There's all kinds of confounding things which make it. But, you know, in a sense, there's a double standard. We can't use that kind of data, they can. But we have to challenge that. But to do that, we've also got to be very, very clear about our own data and be very clear that the data are doing. That's why the Iowa study is such a brilliant study, because it's taken a large group of children and followed them through. So you know exactly who the children are and you can match them. It's the same with Bassin's study. It's what they call a cohort. You're able to match up the individuals. Now that starts to get you down some really good quality research.
Yeah, I would agree with that, of everything that Stephen just said. I think Declan has done an incredible job. I mean, in a few months he's mastered so much of the literature, it's quite amazing. But I think what he draws attention to is the fact that there hasn't been a single health study in Ireland which has had mandatory fluoridation since 1963. They've never done a single health study. It's all studies on teeth, and teeth. And there's similar, Australia, I think there may be 2 health studies in the whole history of fluoridation. In New Zealand, a couple. In Canada, I must tell you a story. In Canada, I was at a meeting in Dryden, Ontario, that was considering stopping fluoridation. They were having a referendum. I challenged the Chief Dental Officer of Canada to debate. He's very pro-fluoridation. He wouldn't debate me. But they brought him in the day before I was about to speak to muddy the waters. So he wouldn't debate me, but he came in to skewer it. And in his presentation, and I'm not making this up, and it's on videotape, he said, I walked down your high street today, and I didn't see anybody growing horns. And you've been fluoridated for 40 years. Now that gives you some idea of the extent of the health studies in Canada. They have these experts in horns, deer horn, moose horn, cow horn, bull horn, goat horn, and they comb the whole of Canada looking to see if there are any horns growing. There are no horns growing, so fluoridation is perfectly safe. The absence of study is not the same as the absence of harm.
Thank you very much, Paul. There's a gentleman over there. How are we going to do it? Another couple?
The audience is very patient. I'm not sure what time. I'm all for it.
My name's Alan, it's nice to be here. I've driven 50 miles.
Can you speak up, please?
Speak loud into the mic. Yeah, hello, my name's Alan. I've come here specifically to see Paul, and it's very nice to hear all your learned thoughts. I'm aware of fluoridation, I've been for a while, my friends here. Now, I've drunk mineral water for the past 8 years, and I can notice the difference after a week. It's similar to this lady over here with her dog. When I drink fluoridated water, be it on pipe, drinking coffee or whatever, I notice a difference. So, apart from distillation, what is the easiest way to purify our drinking water?
This question, of course, is asked all the time. There isn't a satisfactory answer, because basically the equipment that you can buy at, say, a few £100 is only going to give you enough clean water to drink and cook with. It's not going to protect you from showers or from baths, and it's not going to protect your garden if you are a keen organic gardener like my wife. She really resented having to sprinkle fluoridated water on the garden. Also, when you go downtown, every glass of water you're going to have is going to be fluoridated. When you go to work, every cup of coffee, cup of tea, it's going to be, if your town is fluoridated, it's going to be.
There's a cumulative effect. I mean, like your Joy was saying, her meter, we don't know what her fluoride meter resolution is. It might be 0.1 ppm.
Yep.
Most of the handheld ones are. You don't necessarily know unless it's tested professionally. I mean, I can feel it and taste it. I'm sure you can yourself as well.
Yeah. I would say if you want to be absolutely certain that you're not getting fluoride drinking-wise, then use distilled water. Buy distilled water. But if you do that, make sure you replace the minerals that you're not getting, so that there are packets, I think, that you can add to distilled water to make sure you're not losing the minerals. There are two pieces. Reverse osmosis is problematic on a number of fronts. And I would say that if you spend a few £100 on some filter equipment, they get an agreement from the distributor that if you test the water and there's still fluoride in it up to a certain level, then you get your money back. Don't invest any money without that guarantee. As I say, people that are doing the testing in San Diego right now are finding that some pieces of reverse osmosis equipment work, some don't. Some depend upon the flow rate as to how much you remove. And they, in turn, have found a filter which they think is very good and relatively cheap, and that is bone char. Bone that's been charred, like charcoal. And that, because bone attracts fluoride, seems to be very effective. And you should look into that on the internet to see. Yeah, they use it in large systems in India to remove natural fluoride. And one other system that I like is the one that Mark Diesendorf has in Sydney, which is an ion exchange, a combination of a cation exchange and an anion exchange, which means you pull out all the positive ions, all the metal ions, and you pull out all the negative ions, which would include fluoride. And the end result then, if you do that, is H plus and OH minus, hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, and they immediately get recombined to form water. So you get pure water coming out. The thing that impressed me about this is, one, it was quick. Flow rate was very quick. He could, each night he made enough for the next day to take to work, etc., etc., etc. And the other thing is that the moment it stopped working, the conductivity of the water will shoot up. The conductivity of water is very determined by how many ions you have. As soon as the ions go above pure water, boom, you'll see the conductivity increase. A simple piece of equipment will tell you when you need to replace those ion exchange resins. I think it's a comparable price to reverse osmosis. And no, I don't know the company, and no, I don't want to know the company. I'm not in the business of making money out of this issue. But I can give you Mark Diesendorf's email address, and you can ask him for that equipment.
Joy, you want to say
Thank you very much.
Yes, I just want to say to you that anybody here who thinks that the filter jugs you can buy in supermarkets and in books, like Brighton filter, do not take out fluoride. They don't claim that they take up fluoride, so you always have to ask the question, always look at the website and have a look. I've noticed that Kutsani do a whole, I'm not advertising that way, Kutsani do a whole house filtration system which is very efficient. I think it may be activated alum, which is the alternative to reverse osmosis. Personally, I use reverse osmosis, but I do top up with bottled water, just to make sure I have certain amounts of minerals. Although the jury's out, I think, on whether the minerals in natural mineral water are as bioavailable as the minerals you get in food.
The gentleman up there.
By the way, I do a very good ionizer, which is classified as a medical device. So if anybody is interested in really good, very healthy water, please leave me your details, and I will send the information to you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Anybody got any? This is your last chance. Is that it? Yeah. Anybody next? Yes, that is next.
Hi, I'm Corinne Habermas from Birmingham today. I was in Switzerland recently and I noticed all the toothpaste there had a warning not to be given to under 7s. So we're not having that warning in this country, and I think we need to. Anyway, I just thought you might like to know about that.
Get to that, we'll take another question. There's a gentleman here. Yeah, that's a gentleman here. Oh, okay, carry on.
I'd like to say that I did buy a distiller a couple of years ago.
Please speak up.
It takes 6 hours to distill 4 litres of water, and the water is tasteless, rich, food or tasteless. So I stopped using it and I've gone back to using bottled water. I'd also like to find out if the postcard company is going to be implemented in Bedford. We talked about postcard.
Thanks. We will take the last question there, the gentleman here. Oh, there's another one. There's the gentleman here. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. It's Martin Lewis, I live in the outskirts of Bedford. Every 16 to 20 months or so, the National Salted Water Boards raise the subject of wanting to be awarded money or get the money from the users of European law to establish a national water grid. So where do we stand, even if it do that, even if out locally, with water trumped in from elsewhere in the country on this electoral grid that happens?
Thank you. Can we take just general comments?
Just answer the last one because it's very pertinent to what we've been looking at in Southampton. And in fact, when the health authority wanted to impose water fluoridation on Southampton, what they have to do, they have to define exactly the areas which will receive fluoridated water and consult those people. That's how the act was worded. But right from the beginning, in fact, an ex-Southern Water safety officer had said us, well, hang on, they can't keep it to those specific areas because water leaks out into other parts of the system. We share water across reservoirs when there's an area outside the city has low amounts of water. So yeah, this is actually, technically it's quite difficult to do this, and the more you start to link up the water flows between areas, and a lot will depend on whether it's before or after the dose, what we call the dosing point. But it actually is quite difficult to be very, very rigid, and that's why West Midlands is fluoridated, but it just so happens there's a few other places that get a bit of fluoridated water too because they share the same water supplier even though they're not in the kind of West Midlands area. So it is actually very, very complicated, and water systems do not follow easy natural boundaries, and of course the more you link up, the more difficult it will become.
Paul, just add to that, because what we've just heard is a double-edged sword. Because at a certain point, they will say, well, because we've got so many different water places sharing the same water, we will fluoridate the whole lot. Or, double-edged sword, or we'll take fluoride out of everybody. And we've got to make sure that when this decision is up and running in different parts of the country, that we are advocating, because of the complexities, to take the fluoride out everywhere. Take it out everywhere. So we can use this to our advantage, or they can try to use it to cream us.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. I think we had a good evening. All four speakers, on your behalf, I'd like to thank them really, and Paul to come all the way from America. And it's been a very good evening. I hope you've got something that we would be able to make use of in terms of campaigning against the fluoridation. And as I said, the Borough Council, with their wisdom in 2011, decided to stop fluoridation, but they have got to do it now. They've got to put forward that action, what they have actually said, and then put it into proper action. So you people will have to do the work in terms of getting the council to honour their pledge. And I can only say thank you very much. You have been a fantastic audience, and I know Lynn would like to say something. Has she gone? Right, it's getting too late. Joy, you wanted to say one thing? Yeah?
Yes. At the table, we've got postcards for signing to send off to the NHS, where you can refuse your consent to getting fluoridated water. And we've also letting people have guidance notes on how to withhold water charges when you really become absolutely impatient with the intransigence of the health authorities. And I can send them to you by email. So it's a hard discipline, but it is possible to do, and we've proven that it works. I've got a colleague who's over 7 years, and he hasn't been taken to court yet. But you have to be disciplined. So please ask me, send it to you if you want. It's on the table over there where Lynn's doing a wonderful job. Getting things